If you ever wanted to know what life was like with 2 kids, I'm drinking coffee, and it's 4:26 in the afternoon. What's going on, everybody? Gunnar here. We are starting a mini-series on extended body flies. We're going to go over a whole bunch of techniques. I think last time I counted, I was up to 6 ideas to share with you, but this is the first one. It's also the most traditional. It dates back to before 1970s. People were extending the body of a fly with monofilament. So this video is dedicated to how to tie on monofilament, specifically showcasing you Bob Popovic's extended body Bucktail Deceiver. Now I have a video that I made for this fly, posted it about a week ago, that goes over Bob Popovic's Bucktail Deceiver extended fly design. It gets you everything you need to know on tying this classic. It's a classic. It has stood the test of time as far as predator and saltwater and big game fishing goes, as far as being able to build baitfish patterns at any length with any length material. Now I say that we are specifically focusing in on bucktail, more specifically short bucktail. And I don't mean like super short, but average, 4-inch hair, 4-inch hair. The same hair you have right now in your fly shop, in your desk, under your table, in your bin where you got 50 tails, most of them look just like this, besides all the crude fat, because I clean this and I don't care. But I'm sure yours looks better, but the hair length, you have this. So I'm going to show you how to take that 4-inch hair, extend the body behind the fly on a whole series dedicated to different layouts that you are going to kind of pick and choose which one is most suitable for you. So wait till the end before you go buy all this stuff. But we're going to start with the classic. We're going to start with the Bob Pop original. We're going to tie on monofilament, and we're going to do it in hand. Now, to spare you guys from my long windage here, because I tend to talk a lot, we're going to dive right into the technique. This is actually the second time I have filmed this video. This was the first one. Came out wonderful, and I run my mouth forever. So we're going to save all of that, pros and cons, considerations, whatever, till the end. What we're going to do is we're going to dive in to the technique and everything you need. I suppose we'll cover everything you need right now. What you're going to look for is leader material to build these on. And you can see I have this kind of arranged in a strange way, but it's so that I could straighten it, which you do by wrapping something or stuffing it into something and boiling it to rearrange the molecules, shocking it with cold water to remove the memory. And you can buy this pre-done. This product is called Perlon Hard Monofilament Leader Material. You can find it at jbtackle.com. I don't have a relationship, that's just where I have found it. Or you can make it yourself. What I did is I used Berkley Vanish. I'll put up a picture there, but we are going to tie in hand with 60 pound at 32 thousandths of an inch. You want leader material specifically when you make this yourself so that it will be thicker in diameter and stiffer. 60 pound I think is a great place to start. If this is too thin and hard to control, go up to 80. It's not going to have a massive impact on the fly's design and fishability, especially if you have, a 2-inch extension or something. If it's in an 80-pound class, it's not a big deal. You do want to, once you're familiar with it, work down to 60, maybe down to 50. 50 is kind of the baseline for everything. And the lighter pound class, because I did one in 40, that's for a different purpose that we'll showcase in the other videos. So you need monofilament or fluorocarbon, it works with both, without memory, about 1 foot long, and I'll go over why. Next, you're going to need tying thread. I use Danville's fine monofilament in mono. Sales pitch, mono is round, it's slightly elastic. The round bites into both the bucktail and compresses it and flares it wonderfully, but it also binds on itself excessively well so that it doesn't slip up and down the mono straight or your hook. I think monofilament, which is also 50 years old for tying threads, is the best thread to use for hair. 6 thousandths, a little thin, but it keeps you sparse and it keeps you honest. 8/1000 from Vivis, if you're used to like tying big musky flies, is a good place to start. But mono thread, the most important thing about this is the bobbin is light. This is a very light bobbin. This is the Griffic Bass Saltwater Ceramic bobbin. Fantastic. It's probably my favorite, just simple bobbin. But it's very lightweight because we're going to spin this thing. We're going to be whipping this thing around here in about 2 minutes. It gets quite crazy, and if your bobbin's really heavy, it'll just break your thread. You're going to need some CA Plus super glue. This is a CA Plus medium viscosity Zap A Gap. Fantastic stuff. It's going to plastic weld when it kicks the monofilament and the fluorocarbon all together and create a wonderful base. And aside from that, you need bucktail. So let's do it. So I'm going to take my 60-pound and I'm going to cut it at the full length. Don't worry about wasting material here because the goal is to be able to grab the mono and pull it taut, and you're going to need to pull it through your hand and pull it through your hand. You want something to hang on to. I don't like cutting it really short. There's a little bit of waste, not a big deal. Now before we tie on the mono with the hair, we're first going to make a base. We're going to kind of predefine how long the tail is going to be, and we're going to structure it with ribbed mono. It's going to strengthen this a little bit so it's a little bit more rigid and forgiving, but it's going to give it a really rough surface so that the bucktail can't just slide off. If you imagine, this is pretty slick. Even if you get your thread on it, like it can just slide right off. That was kind of a poor demo, but like you tie material on here without a thread base, you're not going to have durability. So we need to create a thread base, but we don't want to do it while we're working with the hair because you don't want any accidental slack in any of this. Plus we're going to create a grid and reference system that's going to benefit us. So I'm going to start forward of the middle because I'm going to tie backwards into the mono here. Just throw some wraps in the same spot. Whip this around gently because I haven't prepped all this yet. I'm going to pull this out, and before I begin, I need to take this thread and wrap it around the leg of my bobbin 1 to 2 times to increase the friction. Because when you get this thing really going, it's going to have enough force to pull out thread if you don't do that. And that's not good. I want it to have so much force on it that it ties things down properly and consistently, very tight with good tension, and I don't want it to slip and fly off or smack my vise or table or anything like that. So you want it to be tight so that it can't slip, so you can fling it hard, and that's why you have to have a light bobbin so it doesn't break. So I'm going to pinch this in my mouth. And I'm going to put one wrap around my bobbin leg there and continue tying down my thread base. Now if you've never tied a fly like this, it's trippy. It's hard to get your head wrapped around this, and what I'd recommend is you make these bases, these kind of tying bases. Let me stop moving everything. You should make these tying bases here. Just do like 10 of them or 15. You can see I need another wrap around my bobbin. It's slipping on me. So we went 2 wraps around the bobbin. So let me get you squared away on this technique here. Few rules that are going to help you. First off, you have to be able to do it both directions. So there's kind of no good side. But what you want to do is you're going to give this a gentle rock. The gentle rock is going to show you that the bobbin is kind of moving perpendicular, which is what you want. I'm not trying to get this to wrap diagonally. I'm trying to get it to wrap perpendicular, but I am guiding it along with my fingers. So that's why you have so much mono, so that you can grab the mono and you can push your fingers along the base of this, straighten them out. So I'm going to get the gentle rock to guarantee it's perpendicular. It's going to help me with my timing and everything. I'm going to keep it going, and then I'm going to push my fingers just like that. And you want to do it in stages, pulling out all that you need. And so I think you can hear that. That's my fingers. Every time it hits my fingers, it makes that noise. And then we'll just throw in 1 or 2 half hitches, and I'll show you something neat. So that is your base, and right now it's very ambiguous. And what I mean is there's nothing to gauge it. There's no reference system. And something I presented in this Bucktail Deceiver design program is that your taper in your tips is equivalent to your taper in the tying points. The distance in the tying points is the distance between the tips. And that's something you want to be able to control and to do consistently, because you're always using the hair at full length. So if you're always taking the hair from the same tail and the same part of the tail, because you're building kind of a uniform section here, and you're always using it at same length, if you know the exact space between your tying points, you can create a perfectly tapered bait fish without any trimming, you know, that would be associated with, say, synthetic flies, and without any gaps or any errors. It will be taper perfection. So what we're going to do is we're going to take a red marker or black marker or a Sharpie, do what you want, and all you need to do is create 2 dots, approximately a 1/2 inch. I like a 1/2 inch. I think it's a very good scale. If you've never done it, just go with a 1/2 inch. If you have longer hair, you can go 3/4. If you have shorter hair, you can go 3/8. But I just start with a 1/2. Start with a 1/2. But put marks on here very lightly so they don't bleed, and give yourself some reference points. Sorry, I just ran up and down the stairs like 5 times, but my kid stole the clipboard. It was offered to him, but we're missing a clipboard. So what I have here is 1, 2, 3, 4 marks on the extension, 4 tying points, and I marked one off of the mono thread base. And the purpose behind that is because that one is going to be on my hook. So I can even see and gauge where the tying point on the hook is going to be. Now, you don't have to tie directly on these red marks. It's not what they're for. It's not to give you a rigid system you have to adhere to, because if you do a 1/2 inch, you might want to go red mark, in between red mark, and go 3/4, 3/4. And of course, this could be, 1 inches. It could just be 2 stacks. It could be 1.5 inches. It could be 5 inches, right? It could be like a beast fly with, like a 6-inch extension with hollow ties. There is no limitation. And the cool thing about that is Bob's fly design, the Bucktail Deceiver fly design, is infinitely scalable. The design, the actual design that's laid out in that video, does not change no matter what size the fly is. None of that changes. So the fact that you can just take the mono, put a completely scalable base, take the design for what it is, and tie it in 5, 6, 7, 8, 9 inches. That's wicked cool. Anyway, I'm getting off topic. This is the long-winded stuff that happened in the last one. I put the marker on first. Not something you have to do, but I do it first, let it dry a little bit, and then I coat it with CA+. This stops it from getting rubbed off by my fingers when I manipulate this in my hand and rub it back and forth. And I need that marker underneath the glue, or else it ain't gonna stay there for me. So I put quite a bit on, quite sloppily. I don't use a brush. I'm not saying a brush is going to be bad, but a brush might make the glue bleed, which is one of the issues if you do it first. And then I'll dab that gently with a paper towel. So you can see I didn't have any bleeding. It's perfect. That's going to cure nice and hot. Weld that thread base to this fluorocarbon extension. Again, we're using 60-pound Berkley Vanish. And those 4 tying points will take me about 4 minutes. Well, that glue is just a wee bit wet. I'm going to start my thread on it, just so that gets very, very happily attached. It'll be a nice little system there. So you can see I got my gentle rock. I pulled out just as much as I need. I am pushing it, physically pulling it through my hand, pushing it forward to get to that first tying point. And this is all you're going to use your vise for. Your vise is simply a placeholder so that you can put it down, work with your bucktail, work with your Flashaboo, but then when we tie it in, we're literally going to do it up here with our hands. So I will put some flash in first. I'm going to make a little flash tail here. It's for pike and muskie for me, so this is kind of do you, right? This is platform stuff, not recipe stuff, platform. But I can still show you some stuff, how to get it on there. So I'm going to take that flash, that's a new flash from Hedron. Pretty cool stuff. It reminds me of Polar Flash. You're going to push it around so that it's evenly distributed. You're going to get it, tie with your bobbin just to get it initially trapped. Put down a little thread base, stop your bobbin, push that thread backwards. Tie it off. It's that fast and that simple. And back it goes. Now between every stage, especially with the hair work, I'm going to tag that with just a tight little drop of glue. Now you can't use the glue as an excuse to have sloppy technique. You really need to practice, and that's why I would recommend making, a dozen of these bases and just keep going. Like make them, don't even plan to tie on them. Just like sacrifice 10 pieces of mono and just make like this infinitely long base to practice that, so that you have consistent circular bobbin pressure. And in actuality, that is probably less prone to error than tying with your hand, where people tend to make ovals and not circles. People tend not to tie with perfect tension. This is tying with perfect tension, but you have to get the timing of it right, and you need to make sure it's perpendicular. So when you can get it done, it's quite a, I don't want to say superior, but it's a very efficient and proficient way to tie fly. So we're going to build our tail section. You can kind of tell from kind of the sweet spot and up. I don't want to use the stuff at the base, which is really, really flary. This is kind of perfect hair, which tends to be more dead, less air, to make these extended tails with, because I usually want the tail to have less volume anyway. So we're going to take a section of tip hair. This first stack is going to be the sparsest. I'm going to try to showcase this technique 2 times in its fullness, then we'll build the fly. Chop that off the tail, grab in the midpoint, spin your fingers, take out the fluff. This should be, you should remember all of this from this video right here. I'm going to stack those butts in my hand so that they are as flush as possible. The small errors that are there that aren't lining up perfectly, I'm going to trim those vertical. Not for the purpose of introducing taper, but so that when I catch that with a very clean wrap, I don't have any that are missed and are going to fall out. I'm going to put that so that my thread overlaps it a little bit, so that I can actually get my fingers to pinch that bucktail and hold it in place. Now I can tie, and my hand is the vise. 3 wraps, just like it was on the hook in the demo video. Thumbnail on top of the tying thread to move it around, pinch it, pinch it, pinch it. Get the hair to move, 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 and create uniformity from random pressures. We're going to support right underneath the mono as best we can without distorting the shape of the bucktail, and suck the slack out. Now you do want to take some hard pressure wraps. In your left hand, the first time you do this, this vice hand, your vice hand, is going to be brutally sore. This takes a lot of dexterity and pinch strength. And now I can pinch that, right? Like I'm upholding it. I got like 5 or 8 really hard wraps. I've pinched my thread so it can't go anywhere. I pulled out a good amount, so I have a lot of force on this. And now I can tie those butts down. And I'll get to my next tie-in point here and just kind of aggressively stop my bobbin. But then you want to just kind of flare that out, make sure there's nothing trapped in it. And you like the way it's laying. And then you throw that right back in your vise here. You want your bobbin to hang so that it keeps pressure on everything. And you can tag that with a dot of glue. Air off the tip of the tail, midpoint spin. Gonna get all that short fluff crap out of there. Stack those butts as flat as you can. Clean up the things that aren't flat. I wish I had sharper scissors, but when you let a 5-year-old tie flies, things happen. It's life. All right, with that vice hand, you're gonna let that come up. I use something I call the Giovanni pinch. Apparently it's just called the pinch wrap. But I have a tying tutorial series from maybe 2 years back that goes over how to do that. It's exceptionally helpful when doing this kind of tying. But you use a pinch wrap to get a really clean catch on there. Hand becomes a vice, you suck out the slack and don't break your thread. 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. Really get it good and tight, draw it out, and tie down those butts. Now what I would recommend first time you do this, just run it with straight hair, but I'm going to throw Flashaboo in of some kind, usually Polar Flash, Wing and Flash, original. This is a new one, but just like every other stage, so that it's just kind of saturated throughout the fly. And of course that is a per user basis and decision to be made, but let's finish an extended body. So that is our extended body tail. Now I did those first 2 tie-ins with you guys, but that still only took 5 minutes to finish. Not a lot of time to create what is essentially a 4.5, 5-inch long tail for a baitfish pattern, which is wicked cool. Just wicked cool. Now it's on mono. And of course these videos, each video is going to feature a different way to make this, to make the extended body. So then why tie on mono, especially with something that is technical, right? It's simple, but it's not easy. It's simple, just a piece of mono that's straight, but it's not easy. So why invest in this technique over the others? So let's do a little pros and cons and trade-offs here, which is just meant to be something to think about as you watch all of the series, which one is going to be most accessible to you. Now, of course, monofilament is traditional. This technique was in existence. Well, I should specify, I don't think the bobbin spinning was in existence. I think that's a Bob Pop original there. But tying on monofilament to extend the body existed even before Bob, before the 1970s when these flies came about. I believe they used to string the mono between 2 vices. I've seen Bob do that when he ties some different squid patterns. And so I want to give him credit for this. I'm not sure which way it goes, but traditional, very traditional. Now the mono has a few things that are really cool. First and foremost, obviously it's weightless. Now when you hear the word weightless, you think castability. I don't necessarily go there per se. You're not gonna, if you put one shank back here, that's not going to make or break the castability of a fly, but the weight of the shank does create odd balance points in how a fly hovers or suspends, or especially it depends on how you animate your flies. If you fish them very fast, not a big deal. You're not going to see a big difference, but if you do long strip pauses, work it really slow, a limp, weightless material, monofilament, being covered in neutrally buoyant bucktail will create some really cool, predictable outcomes. It's going to suspend level, it's not going to dip down, it's not going to dip up, it's going to do exactly what you want. I shouldn't say that. It's going to do the same thing every time, right? If you tie mono, then you tie shanks, then you tie tube, you start lining it with different pound class stuff, you can start to create unpredictable outcomes. Weightless, very predictable. So the predictable outcome is quite nice. I will give you the fact that the weightless format will, because of the water weight of the hair in this very streamlined shape, create a very castable pattern. So you won't have any shock. It won't have any extra weight to fly past the fly line and create excessive shock, which is quite nice. You will see the mono bends, right? The mono is flexible. And I think this becomes part of why you should work down from 80 to maybe 60 and camp out at the 60-50 range, is because this has some good flexibility to it. Now, you are getting most of the swim out of the hair, right? The tapered hair is what's going to swim. But you can't ignore the fact that this can bend on the platform that it's on, and it bends identically-ish to how the bucktail bends. Like the hair that's farther away has the most leverage. It bends in that arc that the hair is going to bend in itself, and they just complement each other. And I think the biggest thing for me is the fact that there's nothing to work around. And maybe that doesn't make sense yet, but when you see the other options have rigging. The other options have R-bends and shank eyes. When you put shanks in your vise, you know, now you're tying bucktail on top of an R-bend and your vise is in the way and you're trying to get it evenly distributed. Maybe there's 2 pieces of wire that you're tying on or 3 pieces of wire and you're trying to get the hair round and evenly distributed. Shanks can be bendy and can fall out of your vise, and not all vices grip shanks well. The tube fly method, which I'm very partial to, well, you got to invest in it. You have to have a tool. You have to have the different tubes. You have to have different tube diameters, and you have to make sure that the mono that's lining them actually fits the inner diameter of the tube. So all the other solutions are kind of cheat codes to get around having to learn this technique, which is technical, but every single one of them kind of creates a whole host of different problems, whether that's investing into different tools and techniques and things, or headaches of tying on shanks and vices close to the vise and spacing everything out. So I'm going to try to articulate all those so that they are headache-free if you explore them, but mono is headache-free. Your ability to get perfect spacing, your ability to mark it so that you have visual cues so that you know exactly where to tie or how much taper you want in the tips. When you put this on your hook, you can tie right next to it. There's no gap, there's no anything, and it's stiff enough that it doesn't foul, right? I kind of talked about in the limp, the movement accentuates that of the hair, but it accentuates it without following. Like you get a little bit more action from limper mono, the 50-pound range, say, but it still doesn't foul. So you can get into, let's say, a shank build that has a lot of movement, but it fouls often. So I think those are a handful enough reasons that you should invest in that technique and try it. Another one is you might just already have leader material on hand. If you fish big game in saltwater and pike and muskie, you might have 50-pound fluoro on hand. Like, just make some straights and try it. It's not a huge investment. But let's tag this guy onto a hook and finish this extended body Bob Popovich's Bucktail Deceiver.